Hey, good afternoon. It's 3:34 p.m. It is June 2nd, Monday afternoon, and I've been busy narrating and like editing scripts, and I'm very, very tired right now. I woke up early this morning and I ran some errands, and now I'm just like really super sleepy. I don't know why. I just keep like getting these weird messages in my head, so I thought I would kind of tell you what I've been up to. Obviously, I'm trying to wrap up this whole thing about my human trafficking presentation, and I just have like one little section to go. And kind of just review my video one more time, and then I will start like communicating with other people, hoping that they'll take an interest in it. I am looking for work, but I figure I'm going to try to kill two birds with one stone and offer two different prices to actually view the presentation. Now, I was thinking initially about using Kofi or something like Kofi or Patreon to do this, but unfortunately, they have lost my trust because of the things that have happened. The violation that has occurred, and I'm basically not somebody who's going to support them. Okay, and I wouldn't encourage if you have an account that is associated with these groups and it's been working out fine for you. I'm assuming that you're content with it, and you possibly were a part of the targeting, or you were probably not so much a vigilante, but you may have gotten sucked in and approved by this particular group because you were a part of the religion. Okay. Now, obviously, by Kofi and Patreon allowing other people to tamper with my account, this lets me know that I cannot trust them. So I definitely need a way to get my video across and then have people pay for these services. So I have devised another way. Unfortunately, not everybody can be trusted. It is what it is. Okay. And like I had mentioned before, I am applying for assistance, from different organizations. I had to reopen my case with the EDD, and I also went down to the welfare office. Right now I'm pending. Now, let's just say, for example, I get people who want to pay to see my presentation. Of course, I'm going to report my income. Okay. That's a no-brainer. Okay. But I keep my bases covered. I don't just sit around, with my fingers and twiddling my thumbs. Some people, it doesn't occur to them to try to look for different alternatives. I'm fully aware that I'm 100% responsible for myself. So I am, interested in looking forward to sharing my video presentation. I am offering two different ways of fees. Okay, the first one is just to watch the video. The second one is to meet with me to have questions and answers. If they are possibly interested in doing that, because some people find the whole idea of being a trafficked individual quite interesting, and I'm open to both. Okay, and then if they wanted me to come to their location, I'm definitely going to be charging for that. Personally, I think it's more convenient just to be able to watch it online. But whatever the case is, I'm working on it. Okay, like I said, in the last few weeks, I've been dealing with a lot, and I missed my deadline for May 1st. I think I was being a little bit over optimistic when I came up with that deadline, because I felt like I could, because I had taken notes, I would say almost half a year ago, but putting them all together was really the biggest challenge. And then I'm still in the process of doing that, and of course, I was dealing with a lot of depression. Me coming to find out certain things after I left Laverne and Son and everything. So I went through a lot, and I'm not, I like I said, I am not somebody who shucks responsibility, because obviously if I did, I would just shrug my shoulders and say, I'm going to walk away from this project. But this project means a lot to me. Okay, it really does. And, I feel very inspired to get it done. So some of the things that were on my mind is like, I was talking earlier about, vigilantes, right? And I was thinking, I wanted to add a little bit more about vigilantes in my presentation, which I am going to. Okay, and I think I've talked a lot about it, but some other issues kind of came up to the surface today. What came up to the surface today is like, how many years ago, like when the targeted individual community, which I really do look at targeting individuals as well as human trafficking as one and the same. Okay, now I know back in, I would say, 15 years ago, okay, people started making reports to like healthcare professionals and also their family members and stuff like this about them having this feeling that people are being watched. It even made the news. People were watching it on the news, talking about these targeted individuals. And oftentimes, when you would read articles about it back then, it was described as people who were paranoid, people that perhaps maybe were maybe dealing with some sort of mental illness, paranoia, and this sort of stuff. Now, what made me think about this issue and how it relates to, the religious aspect of it, because we know that a lot of churches were behind, this collaboration with LDS, Nazis, and everything else. Okay. And even though some of them were in the dark, like I said, when you think about this, the power structure, like a pyramid, the people on top of the pyramid are fully aware of the agenda, the purpose, and everything else. Okay. So it trickles down to different layers. Okay. So then we have the master perps, where obviously Nazis, white supremacists, whatever, trickling down, Mormon Association, trickling down, Baptist, Presbyterian, blah, 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 in your neighborhood, workplaces, all the way down the pyramid structure. This is how it works, right? Okay, well, obviously this was a covert nature. This is a covert program, okay? So I am starting to believe, because I suspect, okay, and let me explain why. I suspect that during this time when we had medical professions, and even like magazines were basically describing these targeted individuals as paranoid people, right? Paranoid, whatever. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, you know what? I know that when I would deal with going to work, I know that when I used to go to the doctors many years ago, I would deal with, like the guy who put a needle in my thigh, right? When I wasn't even there for that appointment, I was actually bringing my son in for a regular checkup or vaccine or something, and he decides to take it upon himself to put a needle inside of me, right? So if I was to report that, I know exactly what they do. They would do the gaslighting routine. The gaslighting thing is like, playing dumb, trying to make people question their sanity. Do I believe that the medical profession at that time, when targeted individuals were talking about these things that were happening to them, reporting, workplace mobbings, being followed, blah, 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 blah. Do I believe that these people in the medical industry were perhaps a part of this big chain of churchgoers who were, trying to just kind of downgrade or dismiss what these people were saying? That is a big possibility. That is a huge possibility. Okay, so I'm briefly touching on that because I think it's very interesting. Okay, I understand, like, the gaslighting thing to me is extremely damaging. Okay, the reason why is because, like when I was upset with my sister and I was telling her that I was terrified that somebody was manipulating my employment. Now I'm looking at the long-term effect of something like this that could happen, because I've been, I understand, like, gang stalking. I understand Nazi techniques, and I understand what the purpose behind this was. Now, my sister was a full-on member of, getting instructions. Apparently, I come to find out she was getting instructions from Rex Laverne. She was even considering herself a churchgoer at the time, which just like blows my mind. Why? Because Lisa never had a spiritual bone in her body, okay? Neither did my mom. But suddenly, all of a sudden, they were acting very cold to me, right? Well, when my sister was sitting here trying to make excuses for why I was no longer able to find work, I remember, because I'm a very intuitive person and I feel things on a physical level, I felt like she was breaking glass inside of my brain. And I would say that even though maybe some other people who may not have very, psychic type experiences, I'm sure that if just a regular human, that would hurt them. It's enough to break their heart, knowing that you're going through this sort of trauma and you have somebody that's supposed to, because you consider them family, supposed to be protecting you, sitting here watching you suffer, and actually you come to find out that they're a part of it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what, like I said, my faith in humanity is just like non-existent, okay, and rightfully so, okay. I understand that throughout my years of being gaslit, I would get gaslighted at the medical professions. Like, it's not a big deal that we're putting a needle inside your leg, even though you didn't ask for it, right? I remember, asking people point blank, like, for example, when I was over at BT Trucking, I asked Jackie, Jackie, I've dealt with some stuff, and you could tell. I mean, if anybody, I guess I shouldn't say anybody, but to me, if I was to see somebody into this sort of much emotional distress, and watching my videos, knowing I couldn't sleep, knowing that I was extremely aggravated, I would not be able to let somebody just go through that. Okay, I mean, something is wrong with you. And so, I never want to see these people again. I really don't. I have no desire to see them again. And this is one of the reasons why, and when I think about the nature of it, okay, like we know that my brothers and sisters are not my brothers and sisters, okay? So I look at this as some sort of macabre freak show that it's kind of like you were raised in this one environment, and then all of a sudden you were raised to a certain age, and at some point these people were meant to like turn on you, right, and basically sacrifice you in some sort of ritual thing. Because if you think about it, their bullying techniques would have lasted forever. Okay, they were until I finally started making sense. I had to sit here and explain this to people and start talking about Donald Trump and all these other people before I started seeing any sort of change. Okay, so these people I was basically, in my personal opinion, I was being set up for some sort of something destructive. Okay, and I honestly can tell you that I believe that these targeted individuals who were talking about this many years ago, okay, were also, a part of this. Now, maybe whether they're clones or not, I don't know. Some of them probably are. Okay. I know when I look at the numbers of like the dollar amounts that they estimate, exactly how much money gets filtered through, people who are, what they call victims of human trafficking. I personally think that a big chunk of it possibly could be from celebrities. And I'm saying, and this is a guesstimation because nobody really ever breaks it down. They'll break it down to like the percentage of labor, the percentage of sex trafficking, and the percentage of maybe, child trafficking. But like when you really get down to where is this, like if you really think about it, I understand that like high dollar people, like, musicians and stuff like that could possibly contribute to that number. Okay. So I'm just saying is that I feel as though human trafficking is a big issue, not just for clones, but it's a issue that everybody should be concerned about. Okay. And so, I was of course writing out my scripts and thinking more about the whole issue of how long this has been going on. I had mentioned my father was a clone, and I had mentioned that these people had enacted the same. This is the reason why he's dead. This is the reason that killed. This is exactly what killed him. Okay, this is exactly what killed him. I will tell you, people playing mind manipulative games on you could actually make you crazy. I really do believe this, okay? I mean, look what happened in my father's mind, okay? And on top of the unnecessary prescriptions that they were giving to my father. Do I believe that these people killed my father? Yes, I do. Okay? Because out of their pure hatred. And I remember, dealing with these people, like they would come over to my house visiting. We'd have some of these condescending neighbors like, oh, your dad hasn't been, because my dad used to take care of the lawn, right? So of course, once he wasn't, up to par anymore, he couldn't do these things, right? So they would come around being all condescending, knowing good and well that they were in the game. Oh, what's wrong with your dad? Like, I wonder what's wrong with him. I'm like, oh, okay, wicked people. Okay, I've dealt with wicked people pretty much all my life. You know what I mean? And these people are all associated with the church. And so, it's not like I don't want to, be this way. Like I always knew that religious people seem to have like kind of attacked me a little bit. Well, a lot actually. But I never realized it went down to this issue of like cloning and all this other stuff. What I wanted to say about this issue is that, hang on, let's get some water. Human trafficking. I wrote this down what I was going to talk about. Okay, now the covert nature of it. Like, okay, what bothers me, and I sit there at night, because I want closure. I want closure. Everybody was trained to gaslight me. Everyone was trained to gaslight me. And I'm going to tell you right now, Rex Laverne is not somebody that deserved that sort of cover. He is not somebody who deserved, to keep, his identity covered. He was an evil man, okay? And you best believe that when I send out my invitation to watch my video, I'm not going all into the Rex Laverne thing, but I do understand that everybody in Kern County knows this issue. Okay, so I am mentioning it. Okay, but Rex Laverne wanted to keep this covert for the sole purpose of deceiving me. Him being able to, manipulate my creations, things that belong to me, divvy up assets or things that he thought that he could appropriate to people that really aren't my family. When you think about it, like the Diana Ross clan, okay, yes, she may have given birth to me, but like I said, legally, she is not my mother. She is not my mother. I am over the age of 18. Like I said, if I was a minor, I would have, I could have chosen to divvy up whatever I made or whatever with my mother, but that's still my choice, okay, whether I want to or not. I felt as though, he was, I believe he was doing this, fraudulently. He knew exactly what he was doing, okay? And I don't approve of what he did along with his collaboration with things like Ko-fi and Patreon. Okay, and see, I look at it this way: if somebody traffics you, okay, I don't show them any mercy. I'm going to throw their names out. Okay, you know why? Because I'm going to let other people know what these people did. And that includes companies. Like, I encourage people, if you've been a victim of human trafficking by a company, an organization that did this to you, you need to let them know, or post it like on some sort of website. I wish I had my own website, really. I wish I did. Like, but I don't. Okay, where people could just report these different companies, whether they be employment agencies, companies you worked for, if you had a landlord that was breaking into your house when you weren't home, because I know that's one of their tactics too. They do all kinds of stuff that's very evasive, right? They need to be reported. They need to report it. And so when it comes to the vigilantes, what I was thinking about, and I forgot to say because I was just like going on and on. When it comes to vigilantes, to make sure that we get rid of them, if you hear people talking about other people and plotting against other people in your environment, there's got to be ways where you can report them anonymously. I understand it's very scary to do these sort of things, but maybe there might be like a Dropbox that you can put a note in, like at the police station or something, okay? Because I understand it's not always easy to stand up and do something when people are, kind of giving you this pressure to stay in the group, okay? But you need to understand that you're an accomplice to, people attempted murder if you allow this person to get away with it and you know it. Okay, so you really need to think about that. So there's got to be people in your workplace, maybe in your neighborhood, who's always talking about somebody who has actually openly admitted to throwing their name out there, blacklisting. I've known managers, right, who would fire people, and they wanted to like get this, this applause, like, hey, look what I did. And then they would sit there and brag about how this person's never going to work again, blah, 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 blah. And, you hear these sort of things, right? Basically, this person is basically admitting that they're trying to kill somebody. I remember when I worked over at Murray Family Farms, the general manager at the time, he was basically telling me that he got even with this one woman. I don't remember her name, but she was a woman. And from what he was telling me, it didn't sound like she did anything to warrant that. Okay, really, okay? But I understand that a lot of people who are on power trips, okay, for whatever reason, they like to harm other people because, like I said, not everybody understands what it means to be a leader. Some people really in their mind thinks it means I need to show that I'm stronger than you by eliminating you. And they literally enact these little tiny wars of genocide out in the workplace. And then they turn around and brag about how this person's going to get it, how they know how they're going to fix this person's wagon or paint this person's wagon, whatever that expression is. And then also, this is their form of, making sure that they are in charge of the entire employment sector because they want to play God and decide who gets jobs and who don't. So he was basically bragging about blacklisting somebody. So he's one of those people who probably got online sitting here in California talking about how this person can't get a job in Arizona, they can't get a job in New Mexico, they're not going to survive in Pennsylvania, they're not going to survive in New York or anywhere else on the map. Okay? And these people need to be reported. Okay? And then, like I said, when I talked about evil and ignorance, okay, if you've heard this, okay, and you understand that it's a law, we all know what laws are written for. The laws are meant to correct or prevent or whatever things that occur in nature. Yes, people get upset. They want to be the best. Yes, they will blacklist you, okay? And you know what? It's a law, okay? So if a person deliberately ignores that, then they're either ignorant or they're evil. And I would say somebody who knows, that this is wrong and this is the likely outcome of what could happen if you blacklist somebody, then I'm going to say you're evil. So when you present things like this to people, it puts them on the spot. And it should eliminate it should just like, the conversation's done. Okay. We know, don't do it. All right. So I know that this kind of stuff goes on a lot in companies. Okay. And a lot of people, because they are sociopathic people, they love to brag about it. They love to brag about it. They want a high five every time they fire somebody. They need to be reported. Okay. And maybe, when people look into this sort of issue, it might be the very first time that they've done something like this. So it's just kind of like a slap on the wrist or whatever. But some of these people may be long-time traffickers. Okay. And this is the point. My point is, these vigilantes or these big-headed people who think that they're doing some sort of duty that's actually going against the law, these are the people that need to get out of here. Okay. My issue is that the reason why I was thinking about the vigilantes, and then Rex's reason for keeping this a covert thing, okay, is because he wanted to have control. He wanted to be able to keep a face of, like, for example, for people that knew him, like, oh, I'm a decent person, and I'm going to have one narrative here, and then this person's going to believe that, so that it gave him the ability to do the sneaky stuff that he wanted to do. Okay, so I understand that. Okay, so when you hear about covert programs going on, you know what you need to do. Okay, I had talked about my concern about Department of Human Trafficking, and perhaps maybe, and I'm not saying they are, okay, that they are actually an operation or a front or whatever. I am basically saying, though, that organizations that you refer to, or could possibly may have dual affiliations or vigilantes. I will tell you, it's their duty to get involved in these sort of companies, because some of these people have an agenda. Like they might have an agenda, like a delusional one, like kind of like Rex, an apocalyptic delusion. It might be a desire to, dominate and conquer only a specific group of people, want to, live on the earth, or have domination or dominion or whatever. This sort of stuff is dangerous, and they need to be reported. But I do also think that by Rex having this be a covert nature, it allowed him to have access to things like, the Swan Song Manifesto, Patreon, and Ko-fi. And I do get the intuitive message that perhaps maybe my family members, and I'm not referring to the only family member that I recognize, I am referring to my adoptive family, and possibly Donnie and Ross, were, being greedy and thinking that they could take my stuff and eliminate me out of the equation. These people were hardcore traffickers, and I hope every single last one of them are dead. Okay, because I'm not benefiting from it. Okay, and I do understand that a lot of the churches had something to do with it as well. And what bothers me, like I said, is I'm sitting here unemployed. I'm sitting here, I'm the one who gets harassed on social media when you go on Indeed.com or whatever. Yes, I believe churches are evil. You better believe I do. I believe that they're evil. So, and then ignoring the fact that Rex Laverne, as well as my adoptive and blood family, which to me, I'm over the age of 18. I have no reason to include them into that sort of stuff. I can ignore them, and I can what do you call it, disown them anytime I want to. They had no right. Okay, they had no right to touch any of my stuff. Okay, and so why I don't think I need to go into why that pisses me off. It pisses me off, but it's the fact that Rex Laverne's attitude was, well, she can go get a job, or she can go get, as if I am something, like I'm nothing. Like they could take advantage of the things that I create, but I am not good enough to benefit from my own creations, which are something that I should be doing. I should be benefiting from. So his thing was that he was a human trafficker to the core. You know what I mean? Because it's like, and we know human trafficking is slavery, right? I'm going to sit here and put out all of that work, and then you're going to offer me some shit job. It should not work that way, okay? It's wrong, okay? And I do understand that a lot of the churches were involved in it, and I never want to hear one person, don't come to my door, do not approach me, I want nothing to do with religion at all, okay? And that's for my own mental well-being, and I've already been like that anyway, but it pisses me off, okay? The Swan Song Manifesto is When I'm talking about my work associated with it, that is mine 100%. And I'm glad. I am so glad. I hope Rex Laverne's did. I do. I don't know. I have not done any intuitive work to find out whether or not Diana Ross committed suicide or not. I don't really care if she does, and I don't care about my family either. Okay, but they had no right to touch my stuff. None. Okay. So anyway, yeah, I am going to be communicating with employers to try, to get them to watch my video. And like I said, I'm still working on my program, my project, my big project. Okay, and I know I really am hoping that it will get done before the end of July. And yes, I think it's that's realistic. I feel bad that I've taken such a long time. Now, yesterday I went for a walk in the evening, like I usually do. I've been going up to the church and sitting on either the church sidewalk or steps, or I go to the library and just kind of sit on the lawn, okay? Because I need to get outside. And, my backyard, I don't like the way my patio looks. It's very annoying. So I just kind of go somewhere else, right? So I've been hanging out there just like in the evening, just to walk up the street and then come right back. But, I've been thinking a lot about, my third quarter newsletter and the things that I want to talk about. I am not going to be focusing too much on, I'm going to talk about my feeling about religion, okay? And I want this to be the end of my discussion about religion. I don't want to talk about religion anymore, okay? I find it very disturbing. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, to me, I was thinking about how deceptive it is, how deep, dark, deceptive it is, okay? Why? Because all these years, I'm growing up in Lancaster, California, being hated by people, right? Being hated by these hypocritical, evil kids, okay? Being annoyed, bullied, disrespected by these evil kids, okay? They knew the story that I was a clone, right? But yet they were somehow making it seem as though it was all my fault, acting as if, I was deserving all of this, right? Which I'm like, what are you talking about? And it was this stuff, the bullying started way before I became like almost, I'm talking about a woman, like before I started wearing nice clothes and stuff like that. Because I would say when I was growing up in school, I always wore nice clothes, but they were more like kid type clothes. I wasn't wearing makeup, no hair or anything like that. So it was like, I can tell that these kids were kind of set against me for no apparent reason. And also, what I find it weird is the fact that, these kids, like I said, they knew I was a clone all these years. They knew it all these years, okay? And I was like 53 years old. No, sorry, 53 years old. Yeah, I'm 54 now, so I think I was like 52 years old when I found out that I was a clone. Okay, and I had no idea. But see, church members, okay, and I've never became like an official on the register roll, because some churches have like, group membership rolls or whatever. They know, who's a member, who's not. They're on a list to get baptized, or they were on a baptismal list, or they have some sort of, record of them being a member of that church. I don't belong to any of those. So this could very well be the reason why I was never told or initiated into this truth of, how clones were created, you know what I mean? Or that they were even around, okay? But like I said, I find it very strange that so many people know that clones exist, but then turn around and seem surprised when, you talk about, clones. Like, in most articles, you don't read about clones. Not commonly, okay? Like, you'll read about some of these clones that they'll talk about, like, they'll talk about certain clones, okay? Like, for example, I don't want to mention any names, okay? Because I understand I'm a part of that Soul Tribe community. But you know what I'm talking about. They'll talk about doppelgangers or talk about, clones that, have malfunctioned. Okay, and I can't quite account for that kind of stuff because that's not the kind of clone I am. But whatever, okay, you've heard about these sort of things. And that they talk about it in that context, but they don't sit here and talk about, how they originated or anything like that. This is stuff that you have to put together. And see, this is one of the reasons why, I understand things like, the orphan trains and where all this sort of stuff comes from. I understand that the Nazis were involved in all kinds of experiments. I understand that the whole Vril story about, them experimenting with raising the dead and all this other stuff. So you put it two and two together, okay? So I understand that I am one now, but at the same time that I endured malicious treatment, evil treatment from religious people who were inspired heavily by Nazis, including black churches. You know what I mean? So this is what I'm saying. When you deal with hate crimes, and this is something I did notice also when I was realizing that I was a targeted individual. I remember I would go to like, job interviews or whatever. And oftentimes there was a black person there, patronizing me, being sarcastic, but did they realize that they were, being a part of the, the Nazi group? It's like, this is one of the reasons why I am somebody, this is one of the reasons why I'm persecuted. I am persecuted because they know, the Nazis knew, and the church people knew that I was never going to be somebody who was going to fall for that lie. Okay, it bothered them because they wanted me to be in church just like everybody else. Okay, if I was in church like everybody else, I would be compliant and I would not be aware, that what was going on around me was illegal. I would think it is normal. I would normalize that sort of stuff. I ask too many questions and I put people on the spot. So I understand now that most people realize that they've been duped, meaning like, the religious thing was a very deceptive thing. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, it's very painful. You know what I mean? Because these people, I would like to understand, why did Rex Laverne and my family think that they were going to take something from me and leave me out in the cold? Why would they do something like that? You know what I mean? Because they were just outright evil. Okay? And people who assisted them were outright evil. You know what I mean? And see, and the funny part is like, in this world, people who have compassion, people who know right from wrong, are the ones who get abused. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't respect Rex Laverne. Let me see. So yeah, I care about my work, and I also care about, I care about my projects, and I resent Rex Laverne for feeling like he was entitled to divvy it up, but I want people to understand that when this sort of stuff happens, this is what's going on, and to never participate in this sort of stuff again. Okay, and like I said, now people understand, and they'll know even more once the moral reset is completed, because, and if they decide to ignore things that are written in the law, well, then that's their problem. Okay, I get this feeling here about Rex Laverne, something about, okay, yeah, I think the community understands that the only family member that I recognize associated with me is Houston Gordon. Okay, now Houston is my son, but even though Houston is my son, he does not have authorization to touch things that belong to me. I am over the age of 18, and I am 100% in control of everything that I do. There are no people who have any sort of say over me. Okay, and if they do, they need to be reported. Okay, now I will tell you that if something was to happen to me, if let's say I had a lot of money, okay, which I don't, obviously, but if I did, yes, my son would be my only heir. Okay, he would be my one and only heir. I do not have anyone else that I would sit here and sign away for. Okay, and that is because I only have him as my family members. Okay, and it's up to me. I don't know where Rex got these ideas in his head that he could take. Okay, you know what it is? I'm getting intuitive messages because I am of royal blood. Okay, I don't understand why. I'm trying to understand why, or I think that's just an excuse. You know what I mean? Just like, other stupid, lame things that they would say, like, oh, well, Maria doesn't have to feel, bad because she missed out on the money that she earned because, marijuana is legal. This is the kind of stuff I keep picking up on them. Like as if, that's going to somehow be okay, or that equates to, it's ignorance, and it's just some form of, to me, it's kind of like cognitive dissonance, like a lame excuse to try to justify their behavior. Okay, and it doesn't. Okay, so basically they were dehumanizing me by taking it, and I hope every single last one of those people are dead. Every single last one. His family, his wife, my family, meaning my siblings, their spouses, their children's children. I don't give a crap anymore. Okay, because that was mine. Not to be discussed with anyone else, not to be divvied up, not to, and it was mine, all mine, and it just pisses me off. You know what I mean? And I care about my work. You know what I mean? So when you hear this sort of stuff that goes on in the community, you guys need to pay attention and don't do it again. Right? Because if you're contributing to this sort of stuff, you are no different than they are. Okay, maybe there's a lot of people who participate in gang stalking and they don't really realize it. They just know that this is a church related thing and they're going along with it. I'm going to tell you right now, if your church tells you to do something in secret, guess what? They're not to be trusted. Okay, like, it pisses me off that these people were using this excuse about me being a clone all these years. Okay, if that was true, right? Why didn't a pastor, a clergyman, or whatever just come up to my door and say, Maria, you're a clone, and I am so concerned about your spiritual well-being. You just put it out to me like that, right? But no, they didn't do anything like that. They had to sit here and create all this drama and then take my money. So the fact is that certain people who have clones that may have in past lives been very successful. These people want to come out of the what do you call it? Come out of the woodwork and start thinking, oh, I want her the stuff that she has or whatever. Fuck Diana Ross, crazy bitch. When I start thinking about her, boy, I get mad. I get mad when I think about just people who think that they have sense of entitlement, and the fact that the Christian religion, okay, at least according to Rex Laverne, okay, was so delusional that it allowed people to have these sort of delusions. Like, Christians are not entitled to anything just because they're Christian. Okay, it perpetuates the criminal mind, is what it is, and that's all it is. You know what I mean? Just because you're Christian does not give you the right to steal, and that's all he did. So yeah, I'm working on another video too. I got so many videos to make. Okay, this one's going to be called no-nos you should know. Like no-no, that's a no-no. Okay, the no-nos you should know are basically outright illegal type stuff that everybody should be aware of. And like I said, if somebody was delusional and thought that, I'm a Christian, therefore I can take her money because she's probably a sinner and therefore doesn't deserve it, your mom was ignorant and she neglected you. Okay, or you just festered into some sort of mental illness. And when it comes to Rex Laverne's case, I think it was a combination of both. Okay, yes, the no-nos you should know are basically talking about things like fraud, things like Ponzi schemes, things like, just stealing, from petty crimes to, things that relate to grand theft, murder, the degrees of murder, things like, things that people should recognize as absolute no-nos, okay? And understanding what constitutes those is important to know. And then I'm working on a video relating to parenting. I mean, I've got a lot to do. I got a lot of scripts. I am very, very busy. But I feel as though this work is very important. Because like I said, there are so many ignorant people. I am not trying to criticize anyone, okay? But this is important because I've seen people walk around with this sort of mentality, and it is so destructive. Is there something else I want to say? Okay, people think that I think with a logical mind. Yes, I do. Okay. And I'm very proud of that. I'm really proud and excited about offering and showing my my brochure, but I'm also interested in, I really hope that, I will get a good response when I reach out to people. I'm looking forward to sharing my presentation with people. It's important to enlighten people on this subject because so many people participate in stuff like this and they don't realize that it's wrong. Some people don't realize that it's wrong, or it's a form of doing something wrong. You know what I mean? And so many people suffer. There's so many targeted individuals whose lives are just broken and they don't know what to do, right? And it's because people around them are watching them and they don't understand the program. They don't understand it. Some people don't understand it, and some people are completely aware of it. So to me, it's the people that are completely aware of it that terrify me. Because to me, you're just outright there being a Nazi. How could you sit here and watch somebody knowing that they're marked for some sort of weird destruction or something, and that people are robbing them, and you're just going to sit there and watch that? You know what I mean? I cannot help but question their morality. You know what I mean? And this is a sort of behavior I never wanted to engage in. I wanted to live a good spiritual life, okay? And I could not find that in religion. I am going to wrap this video up, and I wish everyone a good day. Hopefully I'll get everything wrapped up tomorrow. I did create a presentation like the body of the email, the body of the email, And then, like I said, you know, I would have liked to have gone through a platform like or Kofi or Patreon, because you know it's more uniform, okay? But unfortunately, you know, and I kind of summarized that in my intro letter. It's just the fact that, you know, when you're a targeted individual, you get a lot of people who abuse you, and I've been abused. I've been robbed through, you know, the trafficking program, okay? And I have to be very careful. And you know, it's this crime. You know, these people are absolutely criminals. Also, you know, I do understand that financial scams are on the rise. So, like, once again, be very careful. Be careful what you're doing online, especially things like Facebook. We have a lot of people who are very desperate, and they do all kinds of scams to try to get things out of you. Please be very, very careful. Anyway, wrapping up this video, and I'll be back with another video sometime later. Take care. Bye bye.